Hi guys, welcome back. We're on lesson 40 for my pre-algebra class. Thank you. We're going to be talking about reciprocals, multiplication rule, the division rule, all that good stuff today. So if you're following along at home, we're in the third edition, Algebra 1/2. Like I said, pre-algebra Saxon. Hold 1 second. All right, guys, so let's take a peek at these. If you're in my class, you need to be writing down your examples on your notes and putting that in your notes journal for this lesson. All right, so for example number 1, the multiplication rule. So in the last one, we were solving addition and subtraction equations. We're going to be solving multiplication and division now. Like I said before, the inverse of multiplication, I just totally messed up my bangs. The inverse of multiplication is division, and the inverse of division is multiplication. So let's start with this. We're going to go right into some examples about all these different things, including reciprocals and all that good stuff. So example number 1, make sure you're writing this down. It is 4x equals 12. If you do not see a operation between two things, know that it's probably multiplication. In this case, we're saying, hey, 4 times x equals 12. The inverse of multiplication is division. So we divide this side because if we do, we're able to cancel these guys out and we get that x by itself. Like I said in the last video, the idea is that you want to get the variable by itself. So x equals, and if I divide this side by 4, I have to divide this side by 4. Divide both sides by 4, I end up with 3. Excellent. Let's look at another example. Example number 2. We end up with 2y, making things up as I go along, 2 over 3y equals 1 over 5. All right, guys, so multiplying here, right? We're multiplying 2/3 times y. The opposite of multiply is divide. But if I were to divide this by 2/3, you see I get fraction divided by a fraction, or a wonky looking fraction there. It's actually called a complex fraction. And in that case, we can't do that. We don't divide fractions. What we do instead is we multiply by the reciprocal. And here's why. To get that y by itself, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal here, which is 3 over 2. If I do that, these 3's cancel out, these 2's cancel out, and now I have that y by itself. But again, if I do something on one side of the equation, I have to do it on the other. Okay? So I multiplied by 3/2 here, multiplied by 3/2 here. Y equals, remember, we multiply straight across the top, so I get 3, and straight across the bottom, 5 times 2, which is 10. Okay? Let's look at example number 3. Example number 3, we have m over 3 equals 6. This is divided by, right? So the opposite of divide is going to be multiply. And if I multiply this, I get, if I multiply it by 3, that makes this upstairs and this downstairs, so I can cancel those out. That's why we do that. But what I do to one side, I must do to the other, okay? So now m equals 6 times 3, which gives me 18. Again, just like I showed in the last video, you can always go back and check your work on these by plugging your answer in. And I'll show that for a couple of these other ones. Okay, for example number 4, we're going to talk about division. So we have 4x equals 3. So how do we go about solving this guy? Again, we're multiplying here, and the opposite of multiply is divide. So if I divide, these guys go away and I get that x by itself. What I do to one side, I must do to the other, okay? X equals, now guys, you want to keep your answers in fraction form unless they start in decimal form, okay? Almost always you're going to want them in fraction form. The only time is if they start in decimal form, or if it's a word problem and it makes sense to be in decimal form, like $1 or something like that. So this is 3 over 4. Now, as I said in the last video, and what I just mentioned, you can check your work on these guys. So the original problem was 4 times x equals 3, right? Let's plug in for x. So we're going to put a little question mark here because that's what we're checking. 4, instead of x, we're going to put 3 over 4. Since I'm dealing with a fraction, I'm going to put 4 over 1 just to make it a little bit easier. Equals 3, little question mark. Now, multiply straight, I can cross cancel actually. Let's make that easier. Cancel out this, cancel out that. I have 3 over 1, which is 3. These guys work. Check. Yes, ma'am. That is the correct answer. So 3/4 is our answer. Let's look at example 5. Example number 5. We have n times 0.04 equals 28. Well, the inverse of multiplying is dividing. So we're going to divide by 0.04. What we do to one side, we've got to do the other, 0.04. Okay, this cancels out this. You notice I dropped that 0 that was in front there. That's totally fine. You're allowed to do that. So n equals 28 divided by 0.04. Let's do some side work on that. 28 is on top of the table, so it's going to go under the table here. 0.04. We cannot have a decimal out here, so we have to move this 2 spots. If I do that, I have to move this decimal, which until, like, if the decimal's not shown, remember it's at the end. So I have to move this decimal 2 spots, right? So now what I have is 4 on the outside and 2,800 on the inside with the decimal at the end. I'm going to bring that decimal up so I don't forget about it. So 4 goes into 28 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. 0, when I subtract, I bring down. 4 goes into 0, 0 times. Bring down another 0, 0 times. 700, right? Because 4 times 700 would give us 2,800. So n equals 700. Okay, so, and then of course you can go back and you can check that work too. All right, guys, so the practice problems are on page 135, A through D. What I would like you to do is go ahead and get started on solving those. Pause the video, come on back, and when you come on back, then we will go over those together. For those of you who don't have the book, there's the practice problems all the way right there. You can pause those. All right, when you're done, come on back, and we will go through those together and make sure you did them correctly. So for A, we have 5 over 11x equals 7. I'm going to move this A over just to make life easier. A. So to get that x by itself, we are currently multiplying. The opposite of multiply is divide, but I don't divide fractions. We don't do that, right? We multiply by the reciprocal. Multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to multiply by 11 over 5. What I do, that way these cancel out and I get that x by itself. But what I do to one side of the equal sign, I must also do to the other. Since I'm dealing with fractions, I'm going to go ahead and turn that 7 into a fraction by putting it over 1. And then I'm going to multiply it by 11 over 5. 11 over 5 equals. Now, I can't cross cancel anything, so I'll just multiply straight across the top, which gives me 77. Straight across the bottom, which gives me 5. My answer is 77 over 5. Good. Let's see about B. 3x equals 15. All right, guys. So to get that x by itself, currently we're multiplying. The opposite of multiply, divide. Divide both sides by 3. Those cancel out, and I'm left with x equals 5. X equals 5. Let's look at C. X over 3 equals 5. All right, guys. In order to get that x by itself, I'm currently dividing. The opposite of divide is multiply. If I multiply that by 3, this is upstairs, this is downstairs. That cancels out. But what I do to one side, I must do to the other. X equals 15. X equals 15. All right, let's see about this. D. We have 4x equals 1 over 3. Now, if I divide this by 4, yeah, that'll work, but then I'll be dividing by a fraction over here, and that doesn't really work. So instead, let's multiply by the reciprocal, because that's the option that we have. Now, we're going to need to turn this into a fraction by putting this over 1. The reciprocal of 4 over 1 is 1 over 4. You'll see that this cancels out with this cancels out with this. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. So x equals, multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom, I get 1 and 1/12. All right, guys, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, welcome to solving equations. And I look forward to working with you guys in class about them. Thank you.